Welcome back. Immigration Research Initiative is a nonprofit looking at issues of economic, social, and cultural inclusion of immigrants in the United States. Their recent report, Street Vendors of New York, represents the approximately 23,000 street vendors that operate right here in New York City. Joining me now to discuss the report is the Senior Data and Policy Analyst for IRI, Dr. Anthony Capote. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we talk about the recent report about street vendors, can you tell me a little bit more about the overall mission of IRI?
Absolutely. So we're a nonpartisan research organization that's dedicated to understanding the economic outcomes that immigrants experience, what the economic contributions they make throughout the economy are, and also advocating for policies that make their lives just a little bit easier.
Now, I think it's so important that we're having this conversation in November because there's a lot of preconceived ideas about immigrants and what they add to our country, or, ideas that people have, about how they're impacting our country. Can you just explain, the benefit of having reports that shed light on the economic, social, and cultural inclusion of immigrants in the United States?
Well, I think there's just so much misinformation out there about immigrants, right? I think in a lot of different directions, right? Not only do a lot of people think that immigrants are working only in like low-wage jobs or on farms, but then there's so much misinformation about who immigrants are and where they come from. And so it's really important to have fact-based research and information about who immigrants are, where they're born, where they're coming from, how long they've been here, where they're working. And what I think a lot of people are really shocked to find in a lot of our reports is that they've already got immigrants in their daily life, right? In their workplace, in their family, in their home. A lot of them are hiring immigrants as domestic workers, right? And they don't even really think about themselves in that way. So it's really important to shed light on a population that is so often obfuscated in different parts of our daily life.
Now, I also want to mention the fact that when we talk about immigrants, we talk about it in this like grand idea of, how it impacts the entire United States. But I want to kind of, shine a light on, how they also impact our communities, our close-knit communities. I know we're going to talk about street vendors very soon, but can you talk about ways that immigrants also impact the communities, that we wake up in every morning, where we go get our groceries, things like that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't know when I first started this job, but immigrants are more likely than U.S.-born people to become business owners, only slightly so. And they're actually really likely to become what we call Main Street business owners. So those are businesses like grocery stores, gas stations, nail salons. So there's a really good chance that when you wake up on any given day and you go to one of these big storefronts that you rely on every week or every month, there's a really good chance that that business is owned by an immigrant, and that person is actively taking a part in your daily life in ways that you never really think of before.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I do think a lot of people don't often think about that, like even getting your nails done, or going to the grocery store. If you decide that you want fruit, usually the people that have the fruit stands are people from another country. So I think that's such an amazing point, just to kind of highlight. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I really want to talk about the report, Street Vendors, of New York, or in New York. Can you tell me a little bit more about that report and, what inspired the creation of it?
Of course. So the Street Vendors Project, which is an advocacy organization in New York dedicated to making life just a little bit easier for street vendors, ran a survey of about 2,000 street vendors in 2020. And it was the biggest survey of street vendors ever done before. And they reached out to us and they asked us to help analyze the data and really get a sense of who street vendors were, what were they selling, where are they selling it, and really try to get, for the first time, a really accurate accounting of how many street vendors are actually operating in New York City. Because even though New Yorkers are so accustomed to street vendors, right? We all have like that street vendor that we always go to. For me, it's the halal guy right by Hunter College. Love him. He helped jumpstart my car one time. But even though we all see it as part of our daily lives, we know frighteningly little about them. And so we worked with the Street Vendors Project and with a statistician named Jonathan Auerbach to take our 2000 survey responses and extrapolate out, okay, how many street vendors are really operating in New York City? And that's where we got that 23,000 number. Was from that really intense extrapolation and sort of statistical analysis. And what we found, by and large, was that street vendors are really centralized in certain areas, but that most of them are immigrants. Most of them are doing this as their full-time job or as their primary source of income, and that many of them are also sort of facing a wide set of challenges that we can make a little easier.
Now, definitely, I want to talk about some of those challenges because, as you mentioned, even giving a little bit of a backstory, about, your favorite street vendor. So many of us are so used to seeing them. We may talk with them, have a laugh, but we don't really know what a lot of, street vendors are going through. What are some of the challenges that they're facing?
Well, one of the big challenges is that most street vendors are licensed, especially when we talk about mobile food vendors. They do have licenses, so they're licensed and able to sort of work with and sell food, but they don't have permits. And one of the main reasons for that is that the city has this sort of archaic cap on the number of licenses or on the number of permits that they can give out each year. And so as a result, it leaves these street vendors open to being harassed by the city, randomly being shut down, not being able to access any sort of resources because they don't have the paperwork necessary to protect themselves while they're on the job. And another challenge that they face is obviously access to bathrooms, right? Access to air conditioning when it's really hot, access to heat when it's really cold. So they face a lot of sort of classic challenges that we can all imagine that they're dealing with, but also a few challenges that I certainly wasn't thinking about before we worked on the report.
Now, I also want to mention that just as a random person that uses social media, I've seen videos where vendors have had a lot of their, inventory just thrown away, and we see how the community reacts. The community is in shock, and they view it as an act of violence almost. Can you talk about what that is like for somebody, as you mentioned, who that may be their entire livelihood?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's always so frustrating because I think people in communities tend to love their local street vendors, right? They love the people who they know, who they recognize, are always out on the corner, always selling, especially general merchandise products, right? General merchandise vendors. But for someone to lose all of their merchandise, that can often represent thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars that they've invested in acquiring the merchandise and getting ready to sell it, right? So it doesn't just hurt your business for a day, it hurts your business for like a month. So that becomes a really unfortunate and upsetting outcome if you're unlicensed or if you're unpermitted. You facing those shutdowns become really harmful to you and to your family as well.
Yeah, I wonder, are there any things in place to help these vendors when it comes to permits and licensing?
So when it comes to licensing for mobile food vendors, absolutely, the Street Vendors Project does help street vendors with this. With permits, unfortunately, the only thing that we can do is ask City Council to remove these permits, right? To change the system to make it a little bit more equitable so that everybody has access to free and full participation in an industry that already exists, that already operates at a high level, and that we know isn't necessarily going to compete with with like brick and mortar restaurants and vendors. We know that everybody can coexist happily. It's just that we have this unnecessary boundary or hurdle that keeps some people in a lesser position.
Now, I also want to take the moment to highlight that your study also states that women play a big role as vendors, with 48% of all vendors being women, yet they're less likely to have permits or licenses. Why is that? And I also want to add that sometimes we'll see these women with their children, so they're definitely working hard, and they're trying to provide for their family, but unfortunately, they are also the victims of the vendors that kind of get their stuff thrown away. So, why are we seeing women not have the same access?
So I think that's a really great question. Part of it, there's a lot of different aspects to this. One part is that women are much more often newer to the street vendor industry. So because they're new and because the permits are capped, they're far less likely to get a permit, right? It also has to do with some of the products that they're selling. You even mentioned seeing women with their kids selling cut fruit. This is incredibly common. However, because they're not doing it from like a mobile truck, or they're not doing it in this sort of controlled environment, so many times they're like on the subway platform, they're in front of the park, it does make it a little bit harder to get a license. So is a good example of a group of people who we want to be doing what they're doing, because we all who doesn't love a cut mango in the summertime, like with a little tahini on it? Who doesn't want that? So you have to, this is a group of people who's providing a service that we want. We just need to protect them in more formalized ways.
Now, with that, where can street vendors, because so many people know street vendors, or, are related to street vendors, where can people go to kind of help those who kind of want to continue this business? And then where can people go to learn more about the survey?
Absolutely. So to learn more about the survey, you can go onto our website, imresearch.org. That's immresearch.org. And you can read the full report, which has a really good accounting of everything that we found. And I also have to mention that a lot of the work was done by my colleague, Shamir Settle, who unfortunately couldn't be here today because she's on maternity leave, because she just had a baby, and the baby's so cute. But we...
well, yeah, the
sorry,
website.
sorry. So the website, that was the website. And we also, if you want to learn more about helping street vendors, I strongly suggest going to the Street Vendors Project, which has been doing advocacy for street vendors for more than 20 years.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for, joining us here at BronxNet and talking a little bit more about this, because it's definitely something that I've seen in my community and across New York City. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you would like to learn more about the report, please go to our website at immresearch.org and click on the Publications tab. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us, and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recablecast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Jaime on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.